Okay. Well, thank you very much, Matt and Kevin. And we're gonna go in here with some other alternatives. Okay, let me see. Changes here. So if we're talking now summer forages or alternative forages, we need to be looking at things that qualify for that emergency forage. Matt mentioned some of those summer annuals, particularly the sorghums. But what are the qualifications for an emergency forage or just the planting of a summer annual? So summers here in the upper Midwest have a short window of production. And because of this short window, we want things that have a quick germination, high yield, and particularly for dairies, we want that high nutritive value. So Matt talked about the sorghums, you know, the three types, the forage sorghum, the Sudan grasses, and the sorghum Sudan hybrid. I'll be touching on some other things that are strictly more summer forages, probably lesser quality, more fibrous material, which is teff and crabgrass. And then we have also different legumes that can be combined with those sorghum forages. And then some of the cool season legumes that can be included there. Like I said, I'll be focusing on those two. And then on the cool season annuals, we have the options of ryegrass, which is what I'll be touching on. And then Matt just talked about the small grains. And like we saw in that question, you know, brassicas can be a good one for that transition forages. So what are the things that we need to consider when planting? Pretty much soil type, the field history, if we had any residual application, the nutrient status, and then the seeding equipment. So I'll get started with ryegrass, annual or Italian ryegrass. This is an annual, it's a cool season, doesn't have much of a good cold tolerance, but we're gonna be growing it more around, you know, started planting around this time of year, going into the summer. And although we say it doesn't have cold tolerance, our summers are cool and is well adapted to cool summers. So it has a very high production potential. It is the highest digestible fiber of the grasses among all the grasses that we have, and it has excellent palatability. We usually talk about annual ryegrass, and there's a difference between annual ryegrass, basically heads out in the seeding year, and we also have Italian ryegrass. That's usually like a short perennial, and it will tend to stay vegetative longer. And if it carries into the next year, it will need to have snow cover in order to survive. That's why the Italian and the annual are usually called annual ryegrasses, because a lot of the Italians don't make it past the one season. Advantages is that the Italian ryegrass will remain vegetative much longer, which is what we want in these forages. There's also a lot of turf types. So you need to be careful on the recommendations to use only forage types and do not use turf type, because they'll be very short and we're looking for tonnage. There are many varieties on the market, from early maturing to late maturing. I just had, I'm working with a student who's putting together kind of like a database on different forages, and I can make that available because it has on the main marketers, it will have information on maturity types. So you will have things, you know, from like welter seed, DLF, lacrosse seed. In terms of annual, you have things that are late maturity, and you have many early maturity. So you wanna, you know, stay clear of those. And then you have some that they call medium to late. If choosing varieties, always try to look for things that are stem and crown and have stem and crown rust resistance, because this is one of the Achilles heels of ryegrasses. In terms of adaptation, annual ryegrass is adapted to sandy loam, to clay. It has a slightly acidic adaptation to 5.5 all the way to 7.5, but requires moisture conditions. So this is not one crop to plant where you have very sandy soils, unless you have irrigation. But it requires moist conditions. There we have the adaptation to low cold tolerance, meaning it doesn't take frost. So for planting, you want to do it after we have passed the frost risk. And it can be used as a companion crop to alfalfa. So one of the advantages of the ryegrass is that it has a very quick emergence. When we put all the forages together between, let's say, ryegrass and all the others, ryegrass will have emergence in 5 to 14 days, but it has very good seedling vigor. Out of all the other ones, you know, if you have some of the more perennial grasses, they will take between a week and 2 weeks, and some of them, particularly the ones that have rhizomes, will go longer. Seeding rate is about 20 to 30 pounds per acre if seeded alone, or 5 to 10 pounds if you're using mixes with other either perennial grasses, or if you're putting as a with other companion crop. It's a small seeded, so we're not talking rye the grain. This is a forage grass, and the seeding depth need to be shallow, 1/4 to 1/2 inch in depth. Planting type, late March to May. And this grass requires nitrogen fertilization, about 50 pounds per acre at planting and after each cut. Recommendation is to cut at boot to mid bloom when we have 10 to 12 inches. And this will provide a production of about 2 tons to 4 tons per acre. In the first and the second cutting, you will get most, depending on the varieties, some of them will have most of the production in those first 2 cuttings, with sometimes more like 900 pounds per acre on the last cutting. But some varieties even out and tend to produce each between 1,500 and 2,000 in the first and fourth cutting. But again, this is very dependent on the varieties that you're using. In the variety trials that were conducted here in Wisconsin, Dan used to calculate this beta factor, which allowed to look at the evenness of the varieties in terms of their production per cutting. So here we have, and I took this out of the variety trials. I looked at There are different varieties over time, and then took the averages. And then on average, we get from a total seasonal of 8,200 pounds per acre, you will get about 23% in the first cut, 25% in the second, and so on. And decreasing into the last cut, being a fourth cut, probably about maybe 1/3 of them will make it, or half of them will make it into, of the different varieties will have a fifth cutting, but not too many of them, okay? So again, this is taken from the variety trials, the information that is reported, and you can access that on the website, and then you can look at the spreadsheet and then maybe slice it out by variety types. Okay, so that is in reference to if we have moist soils. If we have more of the sandy soils, we have these two forages, summer annuals, that we've been working with recently, and they can be planted to even out the risk and diversify the croppings that we have out there. But this would be more for sandy soils. And I'm talking here about Teff grass, and then we're gonna look at some information on crabgrass. So let me go back here. In the case of Teff, is excellent for erosion control because of the fibrous root system and the quick germination, which is what we're looking for in a true summer annual planting. Teff is a bunch grass, very tolerant of drought. So if you have sandy soils on drought, this would be a good candidate. This is a grain, cereal grain, used in Africa, in the highlands of Ethiopia. You're seeing here on the red bubble. And it is an excellent forage in terms of quality. It has very fine stems, is very palatable, and the quality is similar to that of Timothy. So if we look at the chart here, we'll see that in terms of digestibility and protein and fiber content, they're very comparable. As mentioned, it's used as a food in Africa for the grain. And recently I was reading some information, it's one of the these hyper foods for people. But what this tells, it has an excellent amino acid composition, and it has lysine content that is higher than wheat or barley. It's high in fiber, phosphorus, calcium, and other elements there. It has a sour taste similar to millet. So for dairy production would be a consideration there. In terms of adaptation, it is drought and heat tolerant, adapted to slightly acidic conditions. So you have there even lower to 4 or 5. It's a true tropical, so doesn't have any cold tolerance. Planting day would be late spring after frost, and seeding rate is 7 to 10 pounds per acre if you're using coated seed. And this is an extremely small seed. It's even smaller than alfalfa. So if you're using a drill, you would need to make a modification to probably drop the seed directly on the soil, or plant with a brilliant. But planting depth is 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. And the utilization, once planted, you can use it 45 days after planting. Production is about 3,000 to 5,000 pounds to the acre. And it's recommended to leave a 4 to 5 stubble height. The taller stubble would make sure that you get a quicker regrowth out of the plant. The other summer annual that we've been looking at, also for the more sandier soils, and probably for dairy operations, this would be more for the fiber. It's another warm season annual. This is the large crabgrass, so we're not talking here about the weed. This is a sod farming that, as you can see there in the picture, it roots at the nodes easily. And there's a variety that was developed. This crabgrass is used a lot in this area in the south. And in Oklahoma, they, for a long time, work on developing or selecting different cultivars. And they had these two release. The one that would work for the upper Midwest would be Quick and Go, because it has a fast germination. We've been working around the Spooner area with excellent results there on coverage. Adapted to sandy loams, doesn't have any cold tolerance. Planting day would be early summer, around June 1st, not earlier. Seeding rate 3 to 5 pounds per acre. And the seeding depth is about 1/4 of an inch. It's not as small, it's a small seeded, not like Teff, but it's small seeded. The production is about 4,000 to 12,000 pounds per acre. You can use it for grazing in stubbles or in heights of 6 to 18 inches, or the hay in height 18 to 24 inches. Always making sure that you leave enough stubble so you will get a quicker regrowth. In terms of quality, forage crabgrass is also a very palatable grass. This large crabgrass in tropical areas is used a lot for grazing when you're grazing dual-purpose cattle or milk production. This is what is used. So as you can see there, digestibility is around 60% in vegetative stage. It drops a little at boot stage, but you're above the 60% mark. And then, of course, the tropical forages, when they head out, the quality tends to drop significantly. Here you have, just a visual of fields that were planted. They, it really respond well. This is about the 4th year that we're going into with this forage. So here you have, this was planted last year in June, harvested in July. Cooperator mentions July 22nd, but have it on the record as the 18th. And you can see the regrowth here corresponds to August 3rd. So let's just...
20 seconds to cut this.
So you can see there that in just a few days, how much the grass tends to come back. That's allowing that 4 to 5 inches regrowth. In terms of dry matter yield, we did comparisons with orchard grass because it's the perennial grass that grows into the summer. And although this is not a typical season long, but we were comparing it with what would be the alternative of those perennial forages. And you can see here, compared to orchard grass, to a 5-year-old orchard grass in blue and a 4-year-old orchard grass, the production of crab and teff in the first cutting, and usually you can get 2 cuttings and a 3rd cutting that is used more of a stockpile. The crab and the teff really have a good production in the summer. So this concludes my presentation.
Going back, we did have a couple questions that came in after Yoana's talk. So the one here was in terms of accessibility, accessibility of small grain seed this season for forage for oats and rye.
I've been working with some, as mentioned earlier, I have, we're working on a database for prices, and we have that, but inventory is running out quick. Just talking to the lacrosse people a week ago, and they were saying that their inventory is going out very quick. So if you have anyone that is considering those seeds, they need to, decide soon.
And then Yoana, the other question that came in during your talk was, can you allow crabgrass to reseed itself for more than one cropping year?
Crabgrass is a strictly true tropical, so it will tend to, in short, we had it reseeded last year, and we're working to our management of allowing it to reseed. So I think with management, you can get it to come back from seed. It's a prolific seed producer to the point that, we may be on the verge of, I won't say invasive, because it doesn't have any cold tolerance, so that shouldn't be an issue. It freezes very quick.